When Cyrus the Great enters Babylon in 539 BCE, the ancient world expects the same thing it always gets: mass slaughter, temples destroyed, populations erased. That is how empire worked up until then. Cyrus does the opposite. No sack, no purge, no terror. Babylon falls almost peacefully and stays intact. That alone makes him an anomaly. But what he does after the conquest is what changes history.
Welcome to part 2, The Land That Refused to Forget, here on Aaron's Smoke Break, and we're going to pick up right where we left off with Cyrus the Great.
So Cyrus doesn't rule by annihilation. He rules by legitimacy. Local laws stay in place. Local elites remain. Local gods are respected. This isn't kindness. It is intelligence. Cyrus understands something Assyria and Babylon never did. If you destroy identity, you invite endless rebellion. If you respect it, people govern themselves for you. That principle becomes Persian state doctrine. The Cyrus cylinder isn't propaganda. It is policy, a world first. It declares restoration of temples, return of displaced peoples, respect for religious traditions. In plain layman terms, worship who you want, live where you are from, and keep your customs. This is not modern democracy, by all means, but it is the first recorded state policy of religious tolerance. And it's not because Cyrus believes all gods are equal, but because he believes empire doesn't require spiritual control. And that is a revolutionary thought. For the Jews in Babylon, Cyrus does something no conqueror ever had. He lets them go home. He authorizes return to Judah, rebuilding the temple and restoration of religious life, not covertly, not reluctantly, openly, formally. Ezra 1:2-3. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. This is a foreign emperor issuing a religious restoration decree that has no precedent in ancient history. And why Isaiah calls him the anointed. The Hebrew Bible, it does something astonishing. It calls Cyrus a pagan, Persian king, God's anointed. Isaiah 4:5-1. And this is a prophecy. Prophesizes that God will empower Cyrus, the Persian king, and his anointed to conquer nations and open city gates. And that word is normally reserved for kings of Israel, chosen leaders. Why Cyrus? Because from the Jewish perspective, he restores life without conversion, faith without coercion, and identity without domination. And that idea will echo for millennia. Cyrus's model outlives his empire. Cyrus dies, but his model doesn't. Alexander the Great studies Persian administration and keeps it. He rules through local elites, not destruction. Only those who defied Alexander got destroyed. And Rome learns the same lesson: provincial autonomy, legal pluralism, religious accommodation. The Roman Republic doesn't invent tolerance. It inherits it. Empire becomes sustainable, not through fear alone, but through structured coexistence. And then fast forward, the Enlightenment rediscovers ancient models of governance. Pluralism, rule of law, separation between power and belief. The idea that the state doesn't need to control the soul to maintain order flows directly from the Persian model. And eventually it lands right here. The United States of America. It doesn't copy Persia, but it inherits the same principle. The government has no authority over belief. The First Amendment. That idea didn't come from nowhere. It's not unique to the United States. Our founding fathers were not some grand geniuses for this. It is a far descendant, thousands of years of a Persian king who realized freedom of worship stabilizes civilizations, an old way of thinking. And Cyrus proves something humanity keeps forgetting. You don't create unity by erasing difference. You create it by making difference survivable. Empires built on terror collapse. Empires built on legitimacy endure. And that lesson matters, especially in a land where identity, faith, and power keep colliding. In the next segment, we move into the limits of tolerance, Greek rule, Roman control, and what happens when empires forget Cyrus's lesson. Look, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Alexander enters the Levant. When Alexander the Great sweeps through the Near East in the late 4th century BCE, he doesn't arrive like Assyria or Babylon. He arrives like Cyrus, but with a twist. Alexander conquers fast. He leaves systems intact, but he carries something new. Greek culture as a civilizing mission, language, education, philosophy, art, identity. His empire fractures after his death, but Hellenism doesn't. It spreads deeper than armies ever could. Greek rule doesn't demand conversion. It demands participation. Learn Greek, adopt Greek names, enter Greek schools, compete in Greek gymnasiums. This is conquest without chains. If Assyria ruled by fear and Persia ruled by tolerance, Greece ruled by attraction. And for many Jews, it works. After Alexander, Judea becomes a pawn, first under the Ptolemaic king of Egypt, then seized by the Seleucid Empire. Taxes rise, administration shifts, Greek cities surround Jerusalem, and slowly pressure builds, not to abandon Judaism, but to modernize it. This is where the conflict starts. Not Jew versus foreigner, but Jew versus Jew. Some embrace Hellenism, Greek education, Greek names, Greek political structures. Others resist. Law, Sabbath, circumcision, dietary rules. This isn't theology. It is identity. Can Judaism survive modernization without losing itself? That question fractures Jewish society. When culture becomes cohesion, under Antiochus IV, Epiphanes' tolerance ends. Facing rebellion and instability, he abandons Greek soft power and reaches for hard control. Jewish practices are outlawed, circumcision banned, Sabbath forbidden, Torah scrolls destroyed, the temple is desecrated, Greek gods are imposed. This is the line Cyrus never crossed. The response is violent and successful. The Maccabees, led by Judah Maccabee, ignite a revolt against a Hellenistic empire, against forced assimilation. They reclaim Jerusalem, rededicate the temple. This moment becomes Hanukkah. Not a miracle story first, but a political victory for religious survival. For the first time since Babylon, Jews rule themselves. The Hasmonean kings emerge, but independence comes with irony. The Hasmoneans begin doing what empires do: forced conversions, territorial expansion, power consolidation. The victims of cohesion become practitioners of it. Live long enough to see you become your own enemy. The internal contradiction weakens the state. Again, why Greek rule matters so much. Greek rule permanently reshapes Judaism. Scripture becomes interpreted, debated. Sects emerge. Identity becomes more textual, less tribal. This intellectualization of faith will define Judaism forever, but it also leaves Judea fractured, culturally rich, politically weak, and vulnerable. And by the 1st century BCE, a new power watches from the west. Pragmatic, legalistic, unemotional. Rome doesn't care about Greek philosophy or Jewish theology. It cares about order. And when Judea tears itself apart internally, Rome steps in, invited at first. That invitation will prove fatal. Greek rule tried to change the soul. It failed. Rome won't try that. Rome will change the system. And in the next segment, we enter the Roman world. Client kings, occupation, rebellion, destruction. And the final transformation of Jewish identity from temple-centered faith to diaspora religion again. Empire is about to get ruthless.
It all came from the Roman Empire. Let's rewind 200 years ago. Let's rewind 2,000 years. Let's rewind 3,000 years. It was always Greece. It was always Rome. Where were you when the Republic was formed? Where were you when the birth of philosophy happened, huh? It was always Rome.
Rome doesn't rule through terror alone. Rome rules through systems, law, roads, taxes, obedience. Religion is tolerated until it interferes with order. Most provinces adapt. Judea does not, because Judaism doesn't allow emperor worship, divine authority of the state, law above covenant. To Rome, this isn't faith. It is insubordination. Judea isn't just another province. Its religion isn't flexible. Its law isn't negotiable. Its identity isn't symbolic. Judaism makes claims. Rome cannot tolerate one God above all earthly power. Law higher than imperial decree. Covenant that outranks Caesar. Rome sees this not as faith, but as a persistent insurgency risk. Rome installs Herod the Great, a king loyal to Rome, not loved by the people. Herod rebuilds the temple on a massive scale, but legitimacy can't be bought. Rome believes infrastructure equals loyalty. Judaism does not. And this disconnect never heals and never resonates with Rome. Under Roman pressure, Judaism splits internally. Pharisees, law, study, adaptability. Sadducees, temple, elite, collaboration. Essenes, withdrawal, purity, apocalypse. Zealots, resistance, violence, revolt. This isn't theology. It is how to survive Rome. And I am sorry if I butchered some of those names. Jesus is not starting a new religion, because now enters Christianity. He is a Jew teaching Jewish law, speaking to Jewish audiences, arguing Jewish interpretation. He's a sect of Judaism. But his message collides with Roman reality. Kingdom of God in a province ruled by Caesar isn't metaphor. It is a threat. Jesus doesn't just challenge Roman authority. He challenges Jewish expectations of survival under empire. Second Temple Judaism is built around law as survival, community as discipline, collective responsibility, resistance to assimilation. The Messiah expected by many Jews is a restorer of Israel, a breaker of foreign rule, like King David, a warlord, a warrior. And Jesus, he offers something radically different. Jesus preaches ideas that directly contradict dominant Jewish survival logic. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. When struck, turn the other cheek. Reject violent resistance. Look at Matthew 5:39.
But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Think about that for a moment. When you are hit, you do not strike back. That is a religion that is 100% peace. Self-defense is not okay, according to Christian teaching.
Under Roman occupation, this isn't just spiritual teaching. It is politically destabilizing. And to many Jews, dangerously naive, Rome doesn't execute prophets for belief. Rome executes threats to order. Crucifixion is reserved for rebels. Jesus is crucified not for theology, but for instability. Christianity is born not as a Roman-approved faith, but as a movement executed by the state. And it also pissed a lot of the local Jews off. He might as well have been a rebel rouser because of how different his beliefs were from the fundamentals of Jewish beliefs. Revolts erupt. Rome responds with total force. After Jesus' death, Jerusalem is besieged. The second temple is destroyed in 70 CE. The priesthood collapses. Rome's attempt at crucifying Jesus to hold the peace does not last. And Rome doesn't just win this rebellion. Rome cuts the spine out of the temple-centered Judaism. After 70 CE, Jews remain in the land. Rome garrisons permanently. Resentment deepens. Masonic hope radicalizes. Rome believes deterrence worked. It hasn't. And this is the breaking point. Judea revolts again, led by Simon Bar Kokhba. Rome decides never again. This time, Rome doesn't just punish. They attempt erasure. Hadrian enacts the harshest measurements yet. Jews banned from Jerusalem. Jerusalem rebuilt as Aelia Capitolina. Judea renamed Syria and Palestine. Recognize those names? Jewish practices are restricted. Pagan temples established. This is intentional ethnic and cultural erasure, not metaphor, administrative. A story not new to the Jewish population. And the diaspora becomes permanent. After the revolts, Jewish life shifts outward. Rabbinic Judaism becomes dominant. The law becomes the homeland. Judaism survives, but without sovereignty. Christianity goes in the other direction. Christianity spreads through Roman roads, uses Greek and Latin, opens beyond ethnicity, detaches from land. And Rome tries to crush it and fails. And eventually the empire converts. The empire that expelled Jews from Jerusalem becomes Christian, which is kind of an off-beaten path of Judaism. And Judaism survives by holding the line. Christianity spreads by letting it go. And in the space between empire, trade, and belief, a third response to Rome is forming. Christianity becomes imperial. Arabia becomes the crossroads. Islam emerges as law, belief, and state combined. This is where the final piece locks in. The world after Rome cracks. Rome in the West collapses, but the story doesn't end. The Eastern Roman Empire keeps going as Byzantium, and the Holy Land becomes part of a world where power is thinning out. Borders are stressed, and everyone is just exhausted. And that matters because the next empire doesn't rise out of Europe. It rises out of the crossroads. Arabia isn't empty desert. Before Islam, Arabia is a transit zone. Red Sea routes, caravan routes, merchant cities. Mecca in particular is tied to that wider world. And the Hijra is the pivot where Islam becomes not just belief, but a political community. This is the same pattern you've seen building the whole show. Trade routes create significance. Significance attracts power. Power brings conquest. Islam doesn't connect to Jerusalem randomly. In Islamic tradition, Muhammad's night journey ties Mecca to Jerusalem. The Quran points to the farther place of worship identified with Jerusalem. That's why Jerusalem becomes sacred in Islam, and why Al-Aqsa matters as more than a building. Then the connection becomes physical, unmistakable, permanent. The Dome of the Rock is built under the Umayyads in the late 7th century, and it becomes the oldest extant major Islamic monument. Islam putting a stamped claim on the same contested ground. And that's the theme of the whole series here. Empires don't just conquer land. They build symbols to make the conquest real. After Muhammad, the early caliphate expands into Byzantine and former Persian spheres. In the 630s, the region we are talking about is pulled into the new Islamic political world. So now the land has 3 overlapping layers that will never stop colliding. Jewish memory, temple, exile, return. Christian sacred histories, Jesus, crucifixion, church world, Islamic sacred geography, Israel, Al-Aqsa, dome. Same land, different anchors. After Rome's repression and dispersal, Jewish life is largely diaspora-based, but it never stops orbiting the land in memory, law, and prayer. Under Islamic rule across different dynasties and centuries, Jewish communities persist in many places within the broader Islamic world. Rome tried to erase a people from a place. History didn't cooperate. The connection stayed alive, not always in sovereignty, but in identity. Then Europe returns, not because of oil, not because of modern geopolitics, but because Jerusalem is the spiritual capital of Christian civilization, and Islam is pushing into Europe. There's an actual reason here. Islam is pushing into Europe and invading on Christian lands. So to the Christian church, you kind of have no choice but to go against your own teachings. And that comes in the First Crusade, which moves towards Jerusalem, and the Crusades become a long cycle of war over a place that holds religious gravity far bigger than its size. The Crusades prove something timeless. When a place becomes sacred to multiple civilizations, war becomes inevitable because nobody can share what they believe God gave them. Your God gave it to you, which is all the same damn God. Like, these are all Abrahamic religions. God gave it to all of you. Fuck, get your shit together. Control changes hands across centuries, but Jerusalem stays one of the most emotionally charged locations on earth because every civilization that touches it inherits the previous layer. The Ottomans controlled the region for centuries. The commonly cited frame in modern historical treatments of Ottoman Palestine, 1517 to 1917, all Ottoman control. This is where modern politics enters full force. Zionism emerges in the late 19th century as a political movement aiming to create a Jewish home in Palestine, secured by public law. And Herzl convenes the first Zionist Congress in 1897. How many conspiracies have come out of that? By all means, share them in the comments. Why? And that's the hinge right there. For centuries, the connection is religious, cultural, and identity. Now it becomes organized political return. And the land already has people living on it with their own identity and claims. That's why modern conflict becomes permanent. The Balfour Declaration. In 1917, Britain publicly supports the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while also stating that nothing should prejudice the civil and religious rights of coexisting non-Jewish communities there. Guys, this is where we go. One document, 2 promises, one land, multiple peoples. And now the world's strongest actors are involved. Back to the same piece of earth. So look at what we just built step by step. Jews rooted in the land, exiled by empire, survived as diaspora. Christians born under Rome, spread through empire, sanctify the land. Islam rises after Rome, fractures, ties itself to Jerusalem, builds monuments that cement claim. Crusades turn the land into a global religious battleground. Zionism turns diaspora memory into political movement. Great powers make promises over land that isn't theirs. And now we are right back where we started. The Holy Land isn't contested because people are irrational. It is contested because history stacked 3 civilizations on 1 square mile and told them it was sacred. The modern conflict isn't an ancient one. It is an inherited one. What we are watching today isn't a new war. It is an old land carrying too much unresolved history. Judaism and Islam now find themselves facing each other over the same ground, each claiming ancient legitimacy, each pointing to history as proof. All their history leads to the same damn place. But here's the part that gets ignored on purpose. The people of this land have never been one people. Not Canaanite, not Hebrew, not Roman, not Arab, not Ottoman, not British. The region has always been a mixture because crossroads don't produce purity. They produce overlap. The land was never static. Only the claims were. Empires came and went. People stayed, mixed, converted, married, adapted. Languages changed, religions layered, and identities evolved. The idea that this ever belonged to one uninterrupted group is historically just false. The land belongs to no one group. But what is real? Every empire that tried to enforce exclusive ownership ended in blood. Every single one. Judaism survived exile by law and memory. Islam spread by law and state. And both are now tied to land, sovereignty, and survival. And when identity becomes existential, compromise looks like extinction. That is how cycles of escalation start. That is how civilian populations get crushed. That is how moral clarity disappears. Not because people are evil, but because fear makes absolutes feel necessary. We've already seen this movie. Assyria tried erasure, failed. Rome tried removal, failed. Crusades tried holy war, failed. You don't erase a people tied to a place. You only multiply the dead. History is crystal clear on that. Option 1 is the path history warns us about. Endless war, collective punishment, radicalization, generations raised inside grievance. That road doesn't end in victory. It ends in mutual destruction, slow or fast. And option 2 is harder and rarer. The lesson Cyrus left us. Cyrus the Great understood something no conqueror before him did. You don't stabilize a crossroads by choosing one identity over the rest. You stabilize it by making difference survivable. He didn't erase gods. He didn't force belief. He didn't demand cultural surrender. He let people live, and the empire lasted. This land doesn't need another empire. It doesn't need another purge. It doesn't need another absolute claim backed by force. It needs the one thing history proved actually works here. Tolerance enforced by law, not erased by power. Not forgetting history, not denying identity, and not pretending faith doesn't matter, but recognizing that this land has always belonged to many at once. We started this story at a crossroads, and we ended at the same one. The land hasn't changed. Human nature hasn't changed. Only the weapons did. So the choice is always the same one it's always been. Repeat the cycle, or finally learn from the one man in history who proved there was another way. That's today's reality check. Thank you for tuning in for part 2. Try not to do this too often, but this was a very big subject with a very rich history, so I had to break it up into 2 here. Thank you for attending Aaron's Smoke Break. Please subscribe, like, share. I would like to do a lot more of these. And for those of you that have supported me and have been watching me, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.